I had an interesting question posed to me the other day, and I thought we should talk about it because it's one of those questions that I don't know if I have an answer for. Why do our vehicles, RC cars especially, why do they have steering in the front and not the rear? So I had to think a while on this question. Why do we have, if we only have one set of wheels that steers, of course, why do we only have steering in the front? It's something that I guess I really haven't thought about very much. Like, why don't we have rigs that have steering in the rear? Because it could work the same. There's a few things that I can think about, but I want y'all to put your comments down below and let me know what you think. Why is this? You know, especially in RC cars, why do we have steering only in the front? And I'm sure there's some very good reasons. But what I can think of, primarily in a vehicle that goes very fast, like a full-size vehicle that we sit in and we drive, it's a lot more stable to have your steering in the front. If you want a vehicle to go into a straight line and be stable to where you can take your hands off the wheels and not have it just suddenly like fishtail and crash, the front steering is a lot more stable than the rear steering is. Because with the rear steering, if you make it where it wants to go straight all the time, it also makes it extremely difficult to steer. So your natural position that your wheels will want to sit in, you're going to have to like, this is rear steering. Let's put this here. If your rear steering is the only steering, you have to put the angle of the steering like this so that it will raise the vehicle up when it steers. Let's see if I can get this right. So it would raise the vehicle up when you steered each direction, and that would make it to where the lowest point is your most stable and it's going to go straight. But that also makes it to where it is extremely difficult to steer because you're literally you're having to lift the vehicle up to get it to steer. And then you're only going to be riding on the edge of the tires because we're going to have to angle it a little bit. And then you're only riding on the edge. I can imagine this would cause some pretty big problems with it, especially at high speeds to where it would start to like scrub and you'd only have like little contact patches on there. But I don't know. I've never went high speed, like 80 miles an hour with a rear steer vehicle. I have gone fast in reverse in my car, and I can tell you that it would start to whip back and forth really easily. And you know, it's not designed for that, obviously. So it's like the steering is stabilized for going forward. So when you go rear, it wants to do one of these numbers. And even in crawlers, I can tell you from experience that if the steering has a little bit of slop in it and you're going reverse fast enough, that the vehicle starts to just kind of like wobble around and get unstable. So why no steering in the rear? I guess my first assumption would be because it's unstable. It's inherently unstable unless you design it to be stable, and then you would have problems with actually having enough steering and grip to be able to do it. Now, I could also imagine that it's maybe difficult to steer. I have driven forklifts before that are rear steer, and it's a slight learning curve. And I can understand why a forklift would need it. They're very low speed, for one, so we don't have to worry about the stability issue. But you're also working in confined areas to where you may not be able to take the wide path around a corner. You may have to get, well, just imagine with this, and this is, you know, some corner that we're getting around. If we're in a vehicle like this and it's like, you know, a tight corridor or whatever in a warehouse, and then you go to take this, you're going to clip the back end unless you go really wide first and then you go around, and then, you know, maybe you can't take that turn. Whereas in a rear steer situation, as soon as your tires clear, you do one of these numbers, and obviously the steering angle isn't quite enough for me to do this, but it's going to whip that back end around, and then you're good. And same for if you're using a forklift, at least. If you're trying to get your forks into an object and you're coming into it, you know, because we imagine it's going to be probably doing work on tall racks or whatever, storage spaces, that you need to be able to swing around without actually moving much. So you get a line for whatever you're trying to fork into and you swing around and then you go into it. And it works out pretty well. So that you know, there could definitely be some uses for rear steer that I see. Obviously, it's used in the world, but for vehicles, maybe there's something that I'm missing. But in a crawler, they go slow. So why aren't we using rear steer only in crawlers? As a matter of fact, when you're competing, a lot of classes only allow you to have steering on one axle, and everybody chooses the front. And it seems like there's got to be a good reason. And I at least know from experience that when you're trying to reverse through a course section, it can be really difficult. But our rigs are set up to go forward, so our weight bias is for, hooking with a forward weight bias and be able to pull yourself up. So when you go into it in reverse, all your weight's up front, and it's difficult. And then the way that the tires slip, and it's a good thought experiment though. Why do we always have the steering up front? Now, a four-wheel steer vehicle, totally different game. You can steer super duper tight when you have four-wheel steering. And not quite in one spot, unless you have enough wheel speed. When you kick the rear, it can actually do like a whoop if you have enough wheel speed to make it hop. I've seen this in competition where guys have four-wheel steering and a good bit of wheel speed. They'll give it like a with the steering at the same time as a blip with the throttle, and the rig will practically jump in one spot. It's really cool to see, because if you can get the front to lift just enough to lose traction or get onto one edge like that, the rear walks around and your rig will try to flip over, but if you know your rig well enough, you can make it just kind of jump. It's really cool. Totally off topic of why we have steering in the front though. So this is a question that I really don't have an answer for. There's got to be some other reasons for it, especially in crawlers at low speed, that maybe it's just not as useful, maybe it's more difficult to drive. There's got to be something I'm missing, I guess. Or maybe that's just the answer. It's just more difficult, and most humans don't want to do the difficult way. We want everything to be as easy as possible. If I have the choice between, say, I don't know, like hunting for a week to get some food, or raising a beef, a beef with legs. They're called cows before they die, I suppose. If I have a choice between hunting and having a cow that is just there that I can kill at any point in time, I'm probably going to choose the cow, because as a human, I want to expend the least amount of energy, whether it's mental or physical, to get my goals done. It's just how we're wired. It used to be really hard to get food, so I can understand why we would be wired that way. So yeah, maybe it's just a laziness thing. Maybe you let me know. There's got to be something that I'm missing here. So there you go. Interesting question. One that was kind of off the wall, and I really like that, because it got me out of the box of, why? It's a question that I think an 8-year-old would ask me, and I would be stumped. I'm like, I don't know why. Gosh, let's figure this out, I guess. So there you go. Why do we have steering in the front? Generally in life, everywhere, pretty much. So there you go. Put your thoughts down below. As always, thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.